Good evening, everyone. It's Sean Buchanan again at Unheralded Heroes. Today, I'm welcoming on esteemed guest Azariah Hope. She helps parents. I met her at the Disruptors Network last year, September, and she's a great advocate for all parents when it comes to having their children and looking after them properly. So, Azariah, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Of course. Thank you for having me, Sean. So I go by the name of Azariah Hope, and I am a care experience mum of four. I had two children adopted when I was 19 and went on to successfully parent almost immediately afterwards from that point up until now. Because of my experiences throughout foster care between the ages of 2 to 16, there was a lot of trauma in the care system and outside of it, multiple local authorities involved, and so many complexities within my own story, trauma that I had experienced in the home and in foster care, my mother's family, even my own father, who I hadn't had contact with, but through reconnecting, realizing how trauma had really embedded itself into our family, even before I was born, um, kind of put me in a position where I not only wanted to become proactive in addressing the things that trauma and adversity can bring within my own family and breaking those cycles for the children that I parent now and parent unorthodox, if you like, through adoption. Um,
Okay.
but also to be able to support and contribute to the changes that need to be made within the children's social care system so that adequate support can be given, but we can also empower parents and families to understand their role in their recovery and moving forward to break those cycles for the sake of our children.
Mhm. And when you created Rerooted, was it in a collaborative partnership with a particular local authority, or you just done that off your own back?
No, so I actually grew Futures Rerooted C.I.C last year. It was basically came off the back of the lot of the work that I started as an expert by experience for the past 4 years. So a lot of that work involved training social workers, foster carers, peer support with parents going through the social care system in any dynamic, and paneling for fostering agencies and a number of charities to inform, equip, and rewire those policies that feed into the children's social care system. And one of the things that struck me was actually everybody's got their agenda and their area, their specialist area that they want to support it in. But one of the gaps within children's social care, which often is the reason for permanent removals like adoption, is the gaps in service, the gaps in support, and understanding that even when social care involvement is necessary, the engagement barriers do need to be addressed in order for that work to take place and for the families to be able to consider what is required of them to make those changes to continue to parent safely or to begin to parent safely, which led to me going, okay, I want to be able to feed into that work. I want to work with families on the ground as well as professionals. I think it's all good and well working with professionals, but I don't think you can work with one or the other without the other. You have to work with professionals and families. And I wanted to be able to do that in a way that felt less limiting. That led to me starting Futures Rerooted and bringing on board my colleague, who's actually a social worker and a doctor, and a
Okay.
parent herself to but her own children that she had brought into the world, um, because we are passionate about knowing that a system is needed to safeguard and support, but being able to be a part of the changes needed to ensure that's done adequately.
That's serious. That's a serious thing. My
Absolutely.
experience with child services, with actually working to be encourage positive parenting and support them through hardship and social problems, is that they're not very, how can I say, they're not very sympathetic or compassionate. It's very much about ticking boxes, compliance, and just covering bases more than actually helping children to have and parents to have whole families. So this is a ongoing thing for, I would say, about 15, 20 years now, but it's come to a head, especially with
Mhm.
what I've noticed in the media about forced adoptions, which at first I thought was a myth. And obviously that's why Nana invited me to the Disruptors Network because he said, look, you may think that most professionals are not really on parent side, but you said there's quite a sizable minority that are willing to help and make changes from within. So I was a bit suspicious at first about changing from within. Won't you be swallowed by the belly of the beast by being like that? I said, no, no, Sean, you'll be surprised. There's lots. So when I came to the Disruptors Network event last year, I was pleasantly surprised. There's someone
Yeah,
who would actually want to help rather than reprimand and take away
absolutely.
children. Mm.
Absolutely. It's definitely more of a systemic issue. I think the services and the systems itself doesn't have the support adequately and readily available when it's necessary. And I think the approach lacks the compassion needed to understand that there is only a very small amount of parents who intentionally go on to harm their children. Many are battling genetic dispositions, genetic trauma of their own experiences, without any opposing experiences or adequate safety netting to be able to overturn their experiences. And the system isn't quite built to support families in that. And my observation has been that because of the systems and the processes in place, there are panels that take place that decide, if we're going to support this family, what are we willing to do? How much are we willing to invest? And actually, that shouldn't be the case. What we should be recognizing is these are the gaps where we have a lack of service, co-parenting, trauma, therapeutic services, and that being offered at the earliest possible opportunity before we get to a point where removing children is an option. Those panels and that process significantly limits the amount of support that families can get. And
Is that
that leaves
intentional,
social.
you think? Sorry to go. Is that intentional or is that just
I
a
think
failure of policy?
my theory, it's policy that every local authority has that structure. Local authorities are running on a business structure. What's a safe investment? So if on paper you have a parent who appears to be complying, the risks seem relatively low. There is not a massive amount of trauma that has taken place to the children. That panel that holds multiple professionals but doesn't involve lived experience, look at the statistics. What's the likelihood that parents are going to engage? What's the likelihood that these services are going to work? And if the likelihood is high, they will invest. If it doesn't look good, they won't invest unless they go into court proceedings and you have a judge that says, I am ordering you to find the service and offer it to this family under these jurisdictions. That causes two problems, because firstly, by the time it reaches that point, we're limited on time frame. You've got 26 weeks to either start and finish that work or start that work and prove that out of proceedings, the parent can sustain and continue the work, or parents don't get a chance to prove themselves at all, which is a problem because then we see that final hearings entail adoption, not because parents don't want to engage, but because the service hasn't been offered, the service isn't available, or the timescales for the child no longer allow for that work to take place. So you will find, and there isn't enough knowledge on this, but there's enough data out there that will show us that these adoptions or long-term permanency plans are based on technicality moreover than the fact that parents don't want to engage. There's not enough space to do the work that's required because we're not acting.
And the SYE training.
Yes, so I was delivering ASYE training, and one of the facilitators had actually said to me, what's worrying is before 8-9 years ago, we were seeing patterns. So it was like we knew what was coming, and we had parents who were not wanting to engage. There was nothing we could do, blah, blah, blah. Now we're getting referrals and we're having to remove children imminently, whether it's because of county lines and drugs, trauma, abuse, whatever's going on. But we're only catching things now as it's exploding, as opposed to seeing a pattern of what was happening and how things were progressing. This is now the time that we need governmental professionals on the ground talking to families. Why is it hard for you to reach out for help? What kind of help do you need? Because actually, we all know. adopters, foster carers, children are becoming far more advanced that when you say to them, what are you struggling with? Even if they can't tell you the things that they're battling with, they can give you a good idea of what they need. And so we've got to this point now where actually, whilst professional input, when you have good social workers and good directors and good senior managers saying, we are missing these things in our services and we need them, we actually need to go past that and hit community level and say, these are the services we need. These are the things that we aren't being offered. Co-parenting support is key. You even mentioned co-parenting to social services and they're like, oh, not my problem. Not our problem.
Yeah,
Not our
why
jurisdiction.
is that? Because with the local authorities that I've had issues with,
especially defending people that are being disadvantaged and underprivileged, then they're basically voiceless. That's why I created Equal Start.
Yeah.
There are too many of these patterns when it comes to like the corporate complaints. I said, look, some of them are even partially upheld. I said, yeah, but there's no kind of reprimanding for the local authority. It's like what they call qualified immunity, similar to the police. So I said, if these things are going on and these kind of failings, you're talking about reprimanding parents, taking the parents away, putting them up for adoption, or putting them into care homes, and Peru schools and things like this. And yet there's no the same kind of governance and oversight for institutional staff. But
I
that
think
qualified immunity is a massive thing. That's why the way they
but
see
also their perspective is different as well. And I think this is our biggest problem. And I think it was one of the reasons why I kind of had to shut up when I got into these rooms, because I thought, I need to understand how your brain works in terms of systems so I can understand what we're up against here when we're trying to make changes. Even though you've got some frontline workers or front or senior managers saying, oh, they're not engaging, it's a problem, we have reached that threshold, we can remove. It's not seen as a consequence per se. That consequence comes when parents are arrested for injuring their children.
that's
And
understandable
actually,
though. That's why you need our
actually,
social services.
where a child is hurt by the hands of their parent, that is the due process. That should be the due process. And that's exactly how it should happen. The problem comes when your frontline social workers and your directors are representatives of a structure. And as long as you can prove that their legal threshold, they have ticked those boxes. They didn't personally go out and punch someone in the face. They didn't see, they can't prove that abuse was seen and left in that household for the child or the parent. Therefore, you can't hold them accountable. But what I will say is that there are certain tactics within social work that are criminally offensive and should be charged when evidenced. For
What
example,
examples? Yes,
there
yes,
is a
please.
lot of coercion, coercive control.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
One of
yeah,
the
yeah. I've seen that all the time. I've seen that
is,
all the time.
and I'll be the first to say that the social worker in question that this happened with, I actually loved her to death. Not personally, professionally, because her ability to be real was unmatched. She saw me and she actually said point blank, we failed you. The first person, I'm now 20 years old, and she is saying, I read your file, 700 pages. We fucked up, basically, is what she said. We screwed it. We should have done more. And when we had jurisdiction after 2 legal planning meetings to say, we should have supported you, we should have supported you before you had kids, point blank. And so it's really nuanced. But in my final proceedings, I'm heavily pregnant, by the way. She was saying, put the kids up for adoption. If you get cross-examined, you're going to this big court in Blackfriars and it's going to be really scary. And I don't think her intention was to be coercive, but it was coercive because it wasn't true. She said to me, sign placements order. I will make sure you get your face-to-face contact, which she did, and I have with my children who are adopted, and I'm grateful. But what she said to me was, put them up for placements order, and we will do everything in our power to support you with the third and keep in contact with the eldest too. And I said, you know what?
How many children do you have?
I have 4. So
Okay,
I have a boy and a girl who are older. They are
okay,
13 and 10. And then I've got 2 younger who are almost 9 and almost 4.
okay.
So that's my contribution to the population, by the way. I'm done. That's it. But, and I agreed. I said, okay, you've promised me about £7,000 per child per year for therapy, which I know they're going to need because they suffered. They saw things they should have never seen. And once my mental health deteriorated, I couldn't parent myself, let alone them. I couldn't look after myself, let alone them. They saw far too much. And that's what I wanted to be sure of. They would get that support. And then when it came to my third baby, despite that conversation, I left hospital 7 days, stayed in hospital for 7 days, waiting for court date, got in there and they told me adoption. The judge that I was supposed to have was very implicit that he was on the decision for adoption. And I truly believe, hand on heart to this day, that had I gone into that courtroom after having my baby and that was my judge, I would have lost my third. But because he was sick and I got put in front of a panel of judges who went, hold on a minute. We've got capacity to change here, looking good. She's engaging. She's doing everything she needs to do. You now need to finish the work. Find the therapy, find the placement, make it happen.
Yeah, but that's like a lottery system, though. That's what I don't like.
It is divine intervention. It's and to me, I know that was divine intervention, but that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah,
And actually, it shouldn't take for two children to be removed and adopted before you say, okay, now we're going to put in the support because she's had another baby, or he has now fathered another child. It shouldn't be like that.
I agree.
Even if you have to remove the children out of an environment, do so, because as a child who wasn't protected, I'm heavy and I will advocate till I'm blue in the face that sometimes children need to be removed. But the
Yeah, cool.
next
Yeah,
option
I agree
that comes
because
next,
I don't have any kind of illusions about it because I've seen reprobate parenting and when there doesn't seem to be much love in the heart and they're self-centered and their social problems consume them. But
absolutely. And again, it's a trauma response. It's a trauma response. So we can't knock it, but we have to understand, okay, this parent is going through something that is debilitating their parenting. It's not allowing them to keep the child's needs in mind at this time. So maybe removal is necessary. But the next plan of action, once you know those children are safe, is how can we get parent on board now? Is there any way that we can get, before we even think about court, because we could be waiting a while, we might not be, who knows, but forget court for a second. Do we have a possibility here now to offer the parent what they need to do what is required? The next stage from that, once the work has started, get the parent in the placement. Get the parent in the placement, increase contact, wrap around care, reparenting experience for parents. If what you're saying is they're lacking something because of their parenting experiences as a child, give it to them. Give it to them through your foster carers. That's what they're there for, right? That's what parent and child's there for. That's what a child focused placement is for. You are offering a child an alternative parenting experience that you want to set them up to ensure that they have the best possible chance at life. Now, it takes more than that. But if you imagine a world where even if children had to be removed and you're offering parents therapy and you are integrating them into placement, I think that we would see far more solid reunification processes in that way, especially when we know said timescales are bypassed once you have supervision orders and once you have full care orders. Get your full care orders and get your supervision orders if that keeps the children safe. And if that buys you an extra 3 to 5 years, because for my third baby, it took 5 years. He was 5 years old when they discharged the care order over his head. And that was our reality, but it worked. And we're doing as best as we possibly can, considering everything. They're well, they're loved, they're seen, they're validated. I can read them like a book, and I am able to address those needs without a social worker telling me what they need. And if it takes 5 years to do that, get your care order and put the work in. I don't see why we don't do that enough.
You know that it's resources. It definitely is resources and funding. And like they said,
100%.
it just leads to a bigger state, more services. That's why I'm still a big, like you said, the tribe, self-resourcing and family. I know not all families are, functional, but there's usually some kind of champion within the family, some kind of functional when there has been some kind of relationship beforehand. They're willing to do that because I've seen that happen with like my brother-in-law's parents, they took in one of their siblings, children, and they had them for over 20 years. It's serious.
Wow.
And it's not once or twice I've seen, obviously, in terms of like the whole population, I would never know the figures on that. But from my personal experiences, I've seen when that can work. Mm,
And this is the thing. It was weird because when I attended an event last week, and
mm,
that's one of the things that the individual was saying at the time. You can't be telling me that out
mhm.
of all the children we have in care right now, there isn't one person that can care for them, that can offer them what they need, that doesn't require them to be in the fostering system or adopted out. And I think this is the problem. There are so many ways in which the special guardianship assessment is taking place that can cause obstacles. And unless you know your rights and you
Yeah,
know you
cool.
can
That's the next
appeal,
thing. That's the next
then
thing.
you're
People are
screwed
not
in
going to
that.
read local authority policies around child social care. A lot of people, they're so stressed out and they was scrambling around and they're looking for someone to bail them out, save them. That's where they take advantage.
I
But I always
just,
told parents, I said, listen, I read. So obviously I went to school, so we live in a literate country, so just read. I said, if you're that passionate about it, read up, defend yourself,
yeah,
self-represent. Go in there, say, look at the policies that they have, use them there because they're supposed to level the playing field,
yeah.
so everyone gets a fair shake. I said a
It,
lot of us we
we
don't do
need,
that. We're
we
always
need
looking to be
to,
handed it to a plate, and then they look at that and say, "Look, see attitude. Look, even for their children, they can't do it. So why should we listen to
absolutely.
them?" Mm,
But I think there is also a level that we need to consider in that because if you have never had someone model what it looks like to just go and get it, what does that look like? If you've not had even a friend, an uncle, Bob the Builder down the road that
mm,
showed you what it meant to persevere
mm,
through adversity and equipped that even in overwhelm and stress, you are able to separate and go, okay, I am overwhelmed, I'm heartbroken, this is all the things I'm having to deal with. But what I need to do right now is research, make calls,
mm.
speak to X, Y, and Z.
I have to admit that does depend on capacity because you see,
Capacity is one heck of a thing.
capacity. So we see where my eldest son, I'm in strange from. But I went to get him full time. To be fair, I called social services to try and get him full time because his environment was diabolical. I didn't
Mhm.
rate the mother. But what happened is I had a brain tumor at the time and blood clots in
Wow.
the lungs. I dropped down. Yeah, but because he said it's my firstborn son, I said no way I'm letting him become a juvenile delinquent. Yeah, I said there's no way. So I done that. Went to court while I had two surgeries on my head. I was on blood thinners. Yeah, so there's thing, and I've seen where people said, "Oh, it's a rare fact." I said no. I said single father households are on the rise. It's the third highest growing household in the UK. When I saw the census when I was 21 in 2001, there was only like 280,000. When I looked at the last one a couple of years ago, they said it's now 480,000 single father
Wow.
households in the UK. So I said a lot of people won't see this because we don't do the big fanfare and we don't talk about it, complain about it as much, or say, "Oh, look what we're doing. We're, forever man and man, macho man." We don't really do it around that. And obviously, some people sneer and they said, "Oh, what ain't you working full time? Or what are you doing all this? Where's the mother?" And in embarrassment, said they don't want to talk about it. But that is
Mm.
on the rise. And that's because of the breakdown in social cohesion, too much stress and pressure on parents, male and female, and they're like,
Yes.
"What? You want them to work full time, create an economy that is functional, while paying taxes, dealing with their own mental health, day-to-day struggles, own physical ill health, then raising children at
Yeah.
the same time, which is a massive responsibility, especially when we're time poor now, with all these
Oh,
commercial reasons we have to go
absolutely.
out and make a living. Otherwise, we're ostracized or demonized in society as layabout scoundrels. So I said, these are the things people have to balance, and we struggle as a race with balance. I said, and
And
so a
there's a
lot.
few layers to that. Firstly, a lot of us are doing it single-handedly. We're
Mm,
single parents, which is tough because we're
yeah,
carrying the load of two that actually isn't beneficial for the kids, let alone us.
I don't
That
know.
shouldn't be the way it is. But when you factor in discrimination, bias.
Especially our community, yeah, definitely.
Oh, anything. Then throw in your own mental health, your own trauma, the generational impact of broken homes.
Over decades, centuries. Yeah, of course.
I mean, science has already told us that trauma can be genetically inherited, even if you don't understand what's manifesting itself. We know that. That is proven. We know that for a fact. Then you throw in, so I'm dealing with my third uncle from 25 centuries down the way. I'm dealing with his addiction, mental health, all of that he had going on. Then I'm now raised in this environment that has its own adversity, its own challenges, its own trauma, its own struggles. No solutions. No one even pulling my not pulling my socks up for me, but telling me, all right, girl, listen, what happened to you and everything that you're dealing with is not your fault. It's terrible you're having to deal with this. But listen, I'm going to need you to pull your socks up. I need you now to buckle down, do what you need to do. Because again, something that again is it's not, social work doesn't have a place for it yet because they haven't built trust. But when you have a social worker who's built trust with a family, and considering particularly for my own dynamic, I saw my social worker as my corporate parent as well as my corporate co-parent. So when I had that good social worker who turned around and said to me, listen, everything that happened to you should have never happened. We screwed up, they screwed up, your family screwed up, everybody screwed up, the country screwed up, everybody has screwed up here. You're the only one who can fix it now, though. We're giving you the lifeline. We're paying for the therapy. We're paying for the parent and child placement. Use it. We know you can use it. We don't know if you can use it yet, but we trust and we have faith in you to do this, but utilize it. Call us. Do what you need to do. You'll be surprised how much fire that will put in someone. So when
to be fair, remember, not everyone's like you, though. I've seen someone like you with your character and capacity, they may put fire in you, but I've seen people that said, you know what, what's the point?
Well, that was the other layer to this. But again, when you think about how the system is structured, it's not like the system's coming in and going, okay, look, we have a child here. There is domestic abuse. There is this, that, and the third. These are the reasons why we're worried, but this is what we want to do. What they do is, unfortunately, or how it's perceived in the situations because of how systems are set up, these are the reasons why they are not parenting correctly. These are the reasons they can't do it, and this is why we want to remove their children. So what do you think is going to happen to the brain of somebody fragile enough who is saying, look, I love my kids, I want to offer them what's best, but you are hearing from multiple angles they can't do this, they are inadequate, they are not capable, they don't have capacity. They hear all those things enough, eventually they'll say, well, sod it. I believe it. Maybe they are better without me. And they will throw in the towel because it's deeper than just what systemic processes tell you.
But to be fair, how I can't balance that when they say this, like what you said. I said, look, Logan Morangi, Arthur Labajano Hughes, Star Hobson, Baby P. Do I need to go on? So that's how I think. Obviously, they get, oh, well, Sean, you got to be a critical friend. I said, no, but you do, because said you saying that, like even when my oldest son said, I asked for a child protection order and to remove and place under my care. And look, I said, I got him an educational healthcare plan in place to help him with the schooling. I said, look, I had to attend because the mother didn't submit it in time. I had to go to emergency. He said, look, we're not going to do it because he said he's misbehaving. The local authority is struggling with resources and don't think it's a good investment. I had to get out of bed after 3 weeks from the operation, and go down. They said, no, that can't happen. I want it in place. I'm not concerned with what the local authorities' problems are. I'm trying to get the best outcomes for my son. I had to go down there personally to make sure he got these ECHP. But even afterwards, I said, look, there's failings here. You got social workers lying, said possibly 5 years for perjury, according to what I've seen in the family court rules. I said, and you can't say, oh, but it's maladministration or that hasn't happened, because I said I gave an opportunity to rescind the Section 7 report before it went to legal. And as you can see, next minute she didn't come to court. Next minute she's not working with the local authority anymore. So how is that possible when I've exposed them blatantly? I've given an opportunity, said, oh, maybe you made a mistake. To backtrack, said, oh, I was lying on a legal document. It said, if that was me, you lock me up faster than Lady Hamilton's chastity belt.
100%.
That and this is when I thought, oh, maybe it's just one of them things I drew the short straw. I said I've looked into his local authority. Complaints are far too much, and plus this local authority has been put into a commission. Central government's had to take it over, so you can see the pattern of neglect and mismanagement going on. Where is the reprimand for them apart from, oh yes, we pay off the problem makers and the people within that's been running basically a SHIT show. You've given them a golden handshake. They've gone off. You've replaced them with puppets now, and they're just continuing the status quo. This is why people don't trust local authority and, in general, social workers.
Because this is the thing. Local authorities are quick to say when you're hiding stuff, you can't be trusted. It's what's that word they use? Disguised compliance, because you're just lying to cover things up. But the system is built on that.
Exactly.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Secrecy and cover up.
Yeah, of course.
And you are expecting civilization to do something different than what is being modeled. And it is going to look like a bold-faced hypocrisy. It's going to look
they
like
will.
a scandal.
Because that's where the power dynamic, like you discussed, that's where the power dynamic comes in. So I said, if we increase our power, which they're frightened of, I've noticed, if we could increase our power and we had more self-governance,
I could tell you some stories about
they wouldn't need this, but they're like, oh, Sean, you can't do that. You said, I don't mind. They said, obviously, in every profession, there's always good people. There's always people that have to go above and beyond. But I said, in these things, it's not regular enough, especially when those cases I mentioned, there were obvious failings, yet the father wasn't offered the child, the grandparents weren't. I don't know if any of them had godparents, aunties or uncles. Or why weren't they actually removed from the homes? You're trying to keep people in there when they're cigarette burns and broken bones.
With assessments as well, it could be anybody. It could be a teacher, old teacher. It could be the neighbor down the road. As long as they pass a DBS check and you know who they are.
Yeah. And they're willing.
Yeah. No, you can't just palm the kid off to Tom 5 doors down the road. But there are so many ways. And even now, like it's so funny because when I left school, I was in 4 different primary schools and I had 2 different secondary schools. And when I touched base with some of my first primary school teachers, and they were like, if I'd known that this is where your life would have ended up, you would have moved in with me. I would have had you living with me. Or if your kids needed somewhere to go, your kids could have been put with me. That would have never been a problem. And I look and I think, so my kids have been adopted. For what reason? I stand on my children needed to be removed when they did. I stand on that. I will never sit here and say, no, it wasn't that bad. It was.
Yeah, because you're self-aware. You see, that's why I rate people like you, because there's too many, I call it mental comb-overs. Yeah, so I said there's too many that do this because there's a couple when I started campaigning before I set up Equal Start, when I was more of an activist. I said, listen, I've been embarrassed a couple of times. Tell me what you haven't done or what has done. Don't give me the propaganda statements and the bias, the rose tinted glasses. Yeah, the convenient myopia, a selective memory. Tell me what has gone on. Tell me what's gone on. Oh, well, I said, yes, look, you're leaving me no choice. So I look like a buffoon if I go in there to defend you now. I said, oh, no, I don't think this is going on. This is not being fair. And you said you're trying to capitalize on my passion for what I went with my eldest son to help you. You need to help yourselves. But so I can see why they're like, well, see, what's the
point? This is why I feel like services like ours are needed, though, because you see how you spoke to. You didn't mollycoddle it. But you didn't come for the neck like, oh, no, terrible person, write him off. But you didn't stand on, you said, hold on, don't lie to me. Don't do that to yourself and don't do that to me. Don't embarrass me. And actually, you need that. I think we all, as humans, forget parents and all the other titles that we get. You need someone who's going to go, hold on a minute, my love. Is that really what happened? Right, we need to do X, Y, and Z because actually you want these kids back. You want a different life. You want to break cycles. This is what it entails. I got you. I'll fight for you. But what you're going to do is you're going to be honest with me. And this work needs to happen. You need to do the work. They need that.
Yeah, of course. But not everyone responds to that because I've done that a few times.
No, it's true.
But not everyone's like it. So I'm saying that's very unique. You and was the other guy Lee that was there?
Lee,
I
he's
don't really
awesome.
see that much. I don't really see that. It's very rare that I said, you know what, I made a mistake. I've jeopardized my own children, bad choices. I had a pattern of, negligent behavior. A lot of them, no, they're not. Nope, 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 no. It's the system,
Nothing
and
changes
they're
if you
just
don't
really.
address it, but that takes work. And I'll tell you why, right? There's two things that come to mind. I would be naive and I would be lying to you right now if I said that at the moment my children were removed, I didn't think there was a problem. I knew there was a problem at that point, but I didn't understand the magnitude until I went through therapy a year and a half later.
Okay.
When I went to therapy, it went deeper than just my kids weren't going to school, wasn't leaving the house, smoking. And when I was leaving the house, because I was high off my head, I could function. But I'm out here dealing now to make money because I now don't have the social capacity to go and sort out my benefits. So now I'm just making risky decisions all over. There is so much going on in that it's the brain can't even comprehend at that stage. There was so much going on. But I didn't understand the magnitude, even down to the domestic abuse. One of the things that I heard often growing up, which actually I inherited into my parenting, domestic abuse was okay as long as they didn't see it.
Yeah, of course. If you hit them, as long as there's no mark on the skin, things like that,
as long as they ain't see me with a black eye, as long as they ain't seeing us scrapping.
And they can eat food and that, and they've got clothes on their back.
They're eating. And that's the thing. When I had my son at 16, I was in college, I was working. He had the best clothes. He was wearing better clothes than me. I was doing all that good stuff. But I'd already said to them before I got back into this relationship, I've got a problem here. I don't know how bad this problem is going to get, but this is going to be a problem. It was only when I was too far gone. I've now had a second baby. The man is now in prison. We've entered into a domestically abusive relationship and he's actually puts me into early labor. I delivered my baby at 18 years old by myself in front of my then 2-3-year-old. Literally, like, I've gone through all of that now, and I've gone from being what they considered the star teenage parent who was academic and doing all these great things to now no longer even functioning. That I'm in my pajamas, my kids are in my pajamas, and that's it, unless I have to go and make money. And so it's so complex. But if you don't offer people the opportunity to at least explore what we are saying are a concern, how can any change ever be made?
Yeah.
It's one thing for them to say, I don't get it. And you can look dumbfounded and say, look, I don't get how you don't get it. But if that's normal for them, or that has been normal, or worse was normal, then of course they're going to be looking at you thinking, well, it ain't that bad. It's not that
Of
deep.
course.
Do the work.
Yeah, of course, definitely. Yeah, I tell my children all the time. I say, listen, if you see how my parents were, you'd run. You keep your mouth quiet and you won't do no talking. Yeah, but not everyone's like that. To be fair, what I do tell them, especially when that comes across, obviously the parents, and they talk about abuse and all that. I said, police officers, taser, asp, gas, and worse, shoot. So I said, if they can wear a uniform and be given this badge and talk about qualified immunity, and there's missteps, and there's no real emotional, maternal, paternal love there, what less parents under them kind of stress are prepared to do that when they're more emotionally connected?
Absolutely.
And you've got less, you've got less patience because you're kind of far removed from it. So I said,
absolutely.
so I said, yeah, come on, you got to understand that. So if someone can be cheeky to you on the street. I said, oh, stop and search. Let me see if you go. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to talk to you. I don't have gonna. And you can all of a sudden get in temper, show emotion, and get all authority. What say parents? You saying parents these days are snowflakes. They're not doing enough. Then you're saying anything more for a smack is domestic abuse. But I said it's okay when the police officers do it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense. So what do you draw the line? So coercive control is used at work. He said, do you want a job? You want a job? You got kids, ain't you? You've been listen, I'll get rid of you. Said, what do you think that does? And you have to go through that more than a few weeks.
And you know what the maddest thing about it is? I say this all the time. Out of all the abuse that I faced in my childhood and in my adult life, it's the psychological abuse that's the worst.
Yeah, of course,
And I can deal with the beating. I would rather take the beating. Even to this day, my not so rational brain, the trauma part of my brain, will sit there and bargain with some of the traumas that I've experienced and go, this or that, this or that, this or that.
Yeah, same with me.
I
Same
will
with
take
me.
physical over psychological any day. The psychological trauma left from coercion is still not fully explored, I don't think. I think
No, it isn't, it isn't. But I'm glad that's on the
understand.
domestic abuse bill. But what I used to tell like some of my female colleagues and some of the ladies that helped me, said, look, by getting this through, you'll see men using more of these tactics now about coercive control, financial abuse. I said, you've got to be prepared for that because that's in law now. And you'll see it. So I said,
Now it's going to be clear to people.
yeah, exactly. So you got to be careful, and that's why you see the raise in the female assailants, and that's my goodness. And some of the things I said, mate, I wouldn't go and talk about that because to me that is just normal argument. But they're like, no, Sean, because it's like payback. I said, no, but some of that is to me like vanilla. That's like if we can't go that far now, you can't say raise your voice to your partner or your children. You can't swear after them. You can't, and that is not realistic. You even get that at work. So I said,
you know what
I said, where do we stop? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Because then any kind of disagreement now, someone can interpret as abuse, especially if it's a pattern of it.
First things first, anything that is implemented as a problem, a breach, legislation, policy, or law should affect everybody. I don't care what you represent. I don't care what your structure is. But
regardless of background,
as it pertains to particularly where one thing that this psychology journey has taught me is brains are funny because someone effing and jeffing at me. I actually got to a point with my foster parents where, especially if I know I've not made a great decision, and I'll say to them, "Can you just cuss me? Because I'd just rather you cuss me than to sit here in silence."
Do the passive aggressive and funny and awkward silent treatment, which they say is coercion as well.
Yeah,
emotional
call me
abuse.
every name under the sun. Tell me how diabolical I've been. I don't care.
Yeah, come on, it's gone too far.
But actually, not everyone's brain is built for that. And we can't, unless you're going to open up everybody's skull and look in their brain, they're not all built for it.
Yeah,
so your 12-year-old child or your 23-year-old who loses their cat could end up in depression.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they've lost their cat.
Of course, because we're all individuals.
And so there are certain parenting styles that I think don't work for every child.
Everyone, no, it doesn't. There's no universal thing.
Absolutely. And I think it has got to a point where I think we also can't do this one rule for one rule for the other, which is another thing.
That's dangerous. That's when you get the two-tier justice system, two-tier decisions.
Two-tier justice system. Yeah.
And said how you get this. This person's kept their child, but this one's got away with it. How does that work? That's the thing why I got into it as well, because I used to think,
how does
my son's first mother, similar circumstances, this one's had the child taken away or he's gone to the dad. How does that work?
Yeah.
I said, explain that one to me. Oh, well, we can't go into individual cases. That was that's always the thing they come back with. Yeah, so that's why it's terrible. It's terrible. So when they say like people like me, you conspiracy theorists and like, oh, we're challenging anti-establishment, I said no, because you go out there and then you tell people, oh, these don't really go. This doesn't really happen, and if it is, it's so rare, it's not worth mentioning. But I said I can understand if it's ambiguous. But when it's clear as day, there should be some kind of mediation, compensation, and the children given back to the child or given to the child that the parent that is most capable of looking after them. It's quite obvious because then down the line now, you've made all these rubbish decisions that you'd reprimand the parents for because we're not institutional, we're just individuals, and it's easy to crush individuals. But because you're in a big, like a gang, local authority, police, MASH, CAMS, all of a sudden you got kind of you're closing ranks, and then you expect parents to trust that when you're doing the same thing that you're reprimanding people for. It's just about power. Then it's not really about justice; it's about power. And our motto is like justice in our time.
There's all of a sudden, I wouldn't say all of a sudden, but over the years, there's been a growing understanding of psychological impact. But the system itself is very slow to catch on to their role.
The bureaucracy and government always turn slowly.
The role in it is diabolical, and I've been saying this for as long as I can.
Too much bureaucracy, too many hands in the broth spoils it.
And there's too many, in this exceptional case, in this reason, this is why it's been allowed, or it's why we are justifying it, and it will never make sense. For me personally, you want parents to be truthful. You want them to come forward with the problem before you have to think about removal. You want them to take that first step to do that, or you want children to disclose, equip them and model, but model first. We need to model first. If
I'm
you are
hoping the
saying,
early intervention thing will sort that out, hopefully.
I'm
Hopefully.
hoping, but I don't. The problem that I have with this is every local authority has an idea of what they think is going to work really well. And this is what's happened with all funding that comes through the local authorities. They get millions and they go, okay, we're going to fund this, that, this, that, this, that. But what nobody is thinking about, and it is driving me up the wall, is therapeutic parenting services for families. Because that covers your co-parenting, that covers trauma, that covers substance abuse, that covers your own parenting experiences, that covers how you think about parenting moving forward. It doesn't always have to be full-blown one-to-one therapy, but therapeutic input involves therapeutic principles being offered. We know that's where the gap is. There are children who are being told on early help forms. My child was one of them. We were struggling with co-parenting because, particularly with my third baby, his dad's still figuring out his life. He don't know where he's going or what he's doing, but he's trying. And I can't fault him for trying. But when things don't work and it's not safe now for him to see his dad, or I have to change contacts because that's not working, I need help. He needs help. He now needs therapeutic input to understand and process the changes that are happening and the things that he wants to say to his dad, or what maybe a space that him and his dad could be in together to share that safely. These are things that they need. These are things
definitely.
that we all need, and yet we are funding shortcuts, parenting courses, parenting groups. Where's the therapy? Where's the therapeutic processes? And I know everybody thinks, oh, therapy, counselling, it sounds all really
You're
rigid.
shrinking my head. I don't need head shrinking. Yeah, of course.
No, actually, sometimes I tell you now, the best thing I ever did was go to therapy, because it's not just about being psychoanalyzed. Actually, having a space that maybe isn't therapy, but has those principles to think with someone, to get curious, to understand the actions and thoughts beside the feelings, and where the line draws between feelings and why those feelings came about, and how you control navigating those things. I think everybody needs at some point, whether it's because you lost your cat and now you can't get out of bed.
Yeah, of course you do.
Or actually you've had 26 years of abuse your whole life, and now you need to address that in order to parent.
Of course.
Everyone needs someone that can question what they are thinking, how they got to that point, how they can navigate those processes, or simply just listen and offer a different perspective. Therapeutic processes can do that. We know that's what's missing. Why are we wasting the funding that we've got now?
And as you were saying about the policy framework that disadvantages, normal residents and normal tenants of the core local authorities. So,
absolutely. So local authorities actually run off a business model. Their structure is, what is the investment and what's the return? The only difference is that there isn't necessarily always a profit margin in the way that we think there is, or that businesses normally have. It's what's the success rate. And that fails them massively, because for people like myself who have 600-700 pages of foster care involvement, complex family dynamics, a panel would look at that and say, this is not going to work. She's not going to engage. This family is not going to do the work. It will not work. And actually, there are more than one story like myself where we go against what trajectory said we would do because of the work that the professionals around us was willing to do, i.e. my social worker, my advocate. And when I had my third baby and I ended up back in a parent and child foster placement, the work that my foster carers did around me to advocate for me and my child were all contributing factors. And a
Okay.
lot of that is missing in the panel work. And a lot of them aren't frontline to see what happens on the ground and to
Okay.
see when the stories defy what they think is going to happen.
Oh, so they
Which
live in
means,
their lofty towers and make judgments. Yeah, it's
yeah,
terrible. It's terrible.
and it's their biggest failure, because actually they're in a really awful position as a local authority, that if you get to court and a judge orders you, or a panel of judges orders you to find the support, to find a placement, which was my personal story. I had my third baby. I fell pregnant in proceedings, and placement's order was granted probably 4 months before I gave birth. In theory, my child was going up for adoption. That's what they proposed. And technically, that's what happens. Despite assessments saying there's capacity to change, she's trying to engage, and actually, she's willing to try. And then the local authority got a shock for their life when we ended up in a court proceedings, and the judge is saying to them, you need to find it. I don't care how you find it, find the placement, find the therapy, make it work. Not only does that disadvantage the parent, but it disadvantages the service, which also disadvantages the parent and the child. So because there is this preconceived notion from panel work before we get to this point, and then throughout in meetings, in their engagement, ultimately, even if parents can make those changes, if the mindset isn't, okay, we're going to exhaust everything and we're going to throw as much as we possibly can at a family to give them the opportunity to do the work, despite what trajectory says they might do, understanding relationships, understanding the work that needs to take place, you leave them in a catch-22. So now you've got a system that is completely confused and flustered, and you now have a parent who's sitting in limbo wanting to fight for their children, and there's no plan in place for them to move forward for that.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
It's one of the things that, particularly when we're talking about adoption based on technicality is the worst failing. It's all good and
Of course
well.
it is. Yeah, it definitely is. Jesus, that's like the
It's
miscarriage
one
of justice.
thing. Yeah, it's one thing where we're saying, I mean, there is another proceedings similar to court proceedings that's called FDAC, Family Drugs and Alcohol, but it addresses trauma in its entirety. And there is a 52% success rate, but FDAC isn't offered everywhere. And one of the things
Is there a reason for that?
Pardon?
Is there a reason for that? Is that because of funding or resources?
Funding. It's
so the local
massively
authorities that
expensive.
do well off will do that, and then others that struggle say, no, that's extra.
Yeah,
We don't need.
some can't do it. The funding just isn't there. There isn't. For some reason, it's not there. Not at a governmental level, not at any other level. And even when parents aren't ready to be a parent, one of the things that struck me when I was in a position to meet these judges and the managers on the front line was when it doesn't go the way parents want it to, they understand that they're not in a position to parent, which is actually powerful, because whilst separation is painful, if you understand that you have done everything in your power to be ready and you're not quite there yet, there is a different level of understanding and future planning that happens when you know you're not ready to parent, which prevents more children coming into the system unnecessarily. And it actually allows parents to focus on their recovery post-separation, as opposed to the what ifs. What if they did put this in place? What if this did happen? What if I could parent? That isn't a problem. That isn't seen in mainstream children's social care processes or traditional family court.
Yeah,
And
they
it is
won't.
the
No,
most
they won't see that.
thing.
They won't see that.
It won't.
Because
It won't,
remember, there's a
because
load of people coming through in terms of the numbers, and they think, oh, that's too much to keep up with individual cases. We look at patterns, trends, and data. That's what they're interested in.
And traditional court, whilst traditional court can order support and therapeutic services, FDAC has that embedded in the service. So if there's drugs, if there's alcohol, if there's domestic abuse, there are specialist teams around those families working with them, and the judge is working with the parent one-to-one, in person, in depth, which is not what happens in traditional court proceedings.
Do you know
So
the percentages of that, of what parents go to after?
I don't know the actual percentage.
Okay.
All I know is that they've
I must
had a
find out about that.
50%
I
success.
never knew about that. See,
There are multiple across the country, and a couple of started propping up as well, particularly around Manchester and Liverpool. But what I've noticed is we're also losing them because they are costly. However, if we can get policymakers and the government to understand the investment in children and families at this
the
stage,
long term will save them money.
it does save them money because they do fail to understand that what you choose to not address in children and families now
It works in
becomes
crime,
DWP,
delinquency, antisocial
mental
behavior,
health,
lack of educated attainment, mental
all
health,
of it.
physical
So
health, ill health.
education, crime, we're talking
Mm.
criminal justice system, we're talking housing, we're talking Department of Work and Pensions. It then becomes everyone else's problem instead of nipping it in the bud and trying to do that work as quickly as possible now. It's
That's not good enough for political brownie points, you see, because politicians usually have a short lifespan, maybe 4 years. Even at the local level, they're like, well, I need some wins now to make me look good for my legacy, and that I can maybe get promoted or move on, become an MP or a cabinet minister, or at least go into corporate sector saying that I changed cultures of institution, so get me a job. So that it starts becoming like that, a careerist thing.
Yeah,
which I don't like.
Again, if the numbers aren't there, you have a bigger problem because that's all they want to see. I mean, the amount of times I've spoken to people who have approached MPs in the expert by experience field with fantastic work. I mean, they have gone to uni, they have studied, they have a framework that I'm looking at and going, we have a in for this. This is needed. I can see the logic behind this. And the professionals, the policymakers are saying, we need numbers. Prove it can work, then we will invest. And then we have those proving that it works and proving that there is an investment to be made here. And by then it's not a priority. And it's one of the biggest and most heartbreaking things about children's social care, because the act of investment is symbolic to families that you care enough to understand maybe where you didn't pick up failings before. For parents, if you dig enough, and you don't even have to dig that far, there is a history of failings, gaps in their own experiences, and support that should have been given to them, and it was never acknowledged. And now you come through the door as parents when they become parents and say, this isn't good enough, your experiences have led you to this. And yet we don't recognize how we failed parents, where we're now looking at them and saying your trauma is too much, your isolation is too much, your mental health is too much.
Yeah, they won't look at it as individuals. That's the thing. Remember, that's their always go-to line, I notice. Their platitude, oh, we can't save everybody, Mr. Buchanan. Yeah, we're not here to be a parent. We're here as a support and safety net in case children are in danger, and there's safeguarded child protection issues. Otherwise than that, it's like Russian roulette.
It is.
And
again,
we look at
postcode
dating
lottery.
patterns, trends. So in the main, if the system works, there's always going to be collateral damage. That's the whole mentality.
I think there will always be scapegoats. And I think this is the saddest thing about the system, is unfortunately there will be scapegoats unless we can remove their ability to look at families as an investment that needs to be a success, but actually a chance we need to be betting on, because the families that we're saying you can't parent these children are going on to parent children immediately afterwards. Therefore, that reads to me that this isn't about their ability to parent. This is their ability to access support. It's their ability to have professionals around them to say, we're not going to do this. Or a judge who will say, even if the local authority wants adoption, I want you to look for those services first. I want you to support that parent. If that accountability isn't there, unfortunately, many families, what we're seeing today is they are told we can't offer you that support. That support is not there. And that's enough in the eyes of the law, because it's not, for some reason, it isn't the local authority's position to cover all grounds to ensure we're supporting parents.
Yeah, true. No, they've got statutory responsibilities.
But it needs to be. If what the Children's Services opinion is that they are here to safeguard children, any issues that could pertain to children from parents need to be addressed, and the local authorities should have a legal responsibility to outsource or bring services in-house to make that happen. And that's until we see that, I think we're going to struggle, because with the training that I've done, I've seen social workers cry their eyes out, knowing that they see the potential in a family. And the only thing that's missing is sign off to say that we're going to put them on this course, we're going to get them therapy, we're going to put them in a parent and child placement. We're going to do the things necessary to build up their network, address the concerns so that they can move forward. Until we have policies doing what actually majority of frontline social workers are wanting to do, we on the ground are struggling. We're struggling, which was why I took Futures Rerooted to that level and said, you know what, I can't wait for structures to bring the services. I think I just need to implement the services that I know I needed and many other parents needed, and hope for the best. And it's proven at this stage, it's early, because I've only been working with the community really now since August. But it has been insightful to understand what a pair of ears and a little bit of solution-based thinking and the ability to help a family or a parent reflect just that basic skill set, those things, what it allows them to do, has been amazing to see.
And you've seen improvements.
Just in them being able to be receptive. And I think there are so many barriers. Parents are scared of social workers.
Yeah, of
They're
course.
worried
Yeah, but that's a generational thing. Yeah.
Generation, absolutely.
Mm.
And for many, this isn't just what I see on TikTok. For people like myself, we lived it. This was what we had to contend with. When we said there was safeguarding concerns, there wasn't enough. You didn't do what you needed to do. When we needed help, you didn't offer that help. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing that one day it may be enough and you could pluck them out, pluck our children out without saying, hold on, let's try and think about what it means to be a parent. Where are your gaps? Let's acknowledge where the gaps are. And instead of scrutinizing, let's offer you the opportunity to build on that, not at least for the sake of the children, if nothing else.
I know with that kind of ideology though, the way, from what I've seen of local councillors and MPs, is that the family is responsible for that. They said we need to take great responsibility. The state can't nanny everybody. Yeah, so they said, yeah, great responsibility amongst the community, amongst family members, extended family, rather than, monetary resourcing for services that said, oh, we shouldn't have to do because it just leads to a bigger state, bigger government, and that means more taxes, and people moan about that. So I know they're between a rock and a hard place with things like that, to be fair.
It is hard.
Yeah,
I think because there's two things, again, there's two things that will happen. Either they'll say you don't meet the threshold for this, for the services we may give you at this stage. We need to get to a point where we're wanting to remove your children, or we've removed your children to offer that support. Or they do focus on instant fixes. Well, this parent hasn't got money coming in, benefits is not cutting it, this is what's going on. The reason why this parent can't work, mental health is the prominent reason for the amount of unemployed people right now. Mental health. The gateway to mental health, if you look closely enough, majority is trauma. So because they refuse to deal with the trauma, then you now have a generation, multiple generations of parents trying to parent and can't function, can't parent and go to work. We've got broken households, you've got trauma, you've got adversity, you've got not enough support, and you're expecting parents to figure it out. That doesn't even make sense, because what the local authority asks us to do when they need to get involved at any stage is to work with us because you need that support. So how can we expect parents to go and find the support, source the support, figure out they need support, if many of them, majority of them, are traumatized children whose trauma was never put in a position to understand that it was trauma, that things should have been different, and that some work needs to be done with their family or them to get through that. If you aren't doing that with children, how on earth are you expecting them as parents to now grow up, parent, and not see an issue? If their trauma and their adversities were never identified and safety netted for them before they had children. It doesn't make sense. And that's one of the barriers that local authorities face when engaging with families. This is how I was raised, or how I was raised was worse. So why on earth are you here banging on my door telling me that I'm not a good enough parent? How I was parented was worse or the same, and that was fine for you. So why is it a problem now? And I think that's the part that's being missed through engagement. And I think
definitely, of course it is. But what you see with that though, what early intervention program that they're doing now, that Nanny always talking about since it's coming last year, you think that will have an impact, or has it started to have impact from what you've seen?
Absolutely not. If I'm being honest, absolutely not. I think there is some good work that can take place, but I will tell you now, for particularly for trauma, I mean, it's something ridiculous, like 1 in 3 people have experienced trauma, probably more. And then you throw in care experience, which is their demographic, the children's services. There's no way that what they're offering is going to be enough. We need to create services, a lot like my own local authority. My last local authority that I worked with as a foster kid and then as a parent, so they were my corporate parent and then became my corporate co-parent, actually brought the service that I utilized, that they funded in-house. It was a process called mentalization-based therapy. And
she does that.
She does, which is why we ended up being connected, funny enough, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And it was amazing. I actually saw some of my old therapists at the Hopeful Disruptors event. So it was fantastic to see them. But that process, it sounds fancy, but all it is that ability to be curious. How does my feelings, my experiences, my journey affect me and the people around me? How is my child, my partner, my friend, the professionals I work with, the world around me operate? How does my role in society impact things for the best or for the worst? How does my actions impact a person? Trauma massively disrupts that. The lack of somebody being curious about your own experiences also hinders that process.
Yeah, I know why they do that though. With that, they're thinking if you get too involved personally, they said you lose the professional conduct, and again they can break safeguarding as well with that. And then there's abuse of power or there's inappropriate relationships. So that's why I think they worry about that, because those kind of scandals come out in the community papers all the time, from what I see.
I mean, it's true. There does need to be a line, but I don't think it could ever be inappropriate to have grace. It can never be inappropriate to show compassion. And I think those are things you don't need physical touch to show to someone. You don't need anything that could ever be misinterpreted to offer that. And actually being able to say, as a system, I think because the system isn't moving in that direction, when you do have social workers who want to be involved and want to be proactive in supporting families, it is seen as inappropriate because the system doesn't model that. But the system should. The system should be modeling. We know our priority is to keep children safe. Before we get to a point where children need to be removed, why are we not exercising the full rights of the Children's Rights Act and every other act to ensure that families are
cherry
given
picking? Yeah, they cherry pick all the time. They cherry pick all the time.
Because on paper, I mean, I can only speak for my own story, but you hear stories like mine. This kid was in foster care between the ages of 2 to 16. There was gang involvement. There was concerns about gaps in records. There was domestic abuse growing up for her. She
County
did drugs. There was everything that a social worker would ever worry about in terms of trauma was written in 700 pages. So they're seeing that and not seeing me. What they missed in all of that was every time that I had said to social workers, I'm aware of what my trauma is going to do to my parenting and I want that support, I'll take it. They missed the times that I begged the social workers at 16 to put me back in parent and child placement with my 1-year-old, as opposed to ending up in temporary accommodation, which is where I ended up. They refused me because I wouldn't take a unit and put me in temporary accommodation. those are the things that are missed in records and often lead to that, well, trajectory doesn't look good. It's not looking great. This is probably not going to go well. When actually what you need is a fresh-eyed, receptive and curious social worker to hit the ground running and
You
say,
see,
okay.
that's terrible though, because they always talk about case by case. This is what I don't like with them. This is where the hypocrisy comes in, especially with people in a position of authority. They
Yeah.
talk about trends, data patterns, but then when it comes to scrutiny, when the people have to look at them and regulators, well, us as regulators, not professional regulators, the homework, people marking their own homework, say former colleagues marking other, current colleagues of work for homework. They seem to be like, oh well, you haven't fulfilled your part of the bargain. There's statutory law in place. You got trial protection. It's for your own good. I said, yeah, but then look, you've had people in that, like rogue social workers. You've had people like you being callous, and they're judging it because of their previous experiences instead of, like you said, fresh eyes, case by case basis. You want us to look at and overlook rogue social workers and miscarriages of justice, but then when you see that most parents are struggling, you then want to look at it as an overview rather than, again, case by case. It said one social worker doesn't deal with whatever, how many thousands of parents out there, or hundreds or tens of thousands of parents out there that are having issues. You don't do that. You want it to be singularly about that parent at the time. So that's when you can't look at that about making these predetermined judgments in your mind about it's unlikely the circumstances don't look good. They will never be able to progress to become well-rounded members of the public or be beneficial to society. So because we know most times, maybe 8 times out of 10 this goes bad, we'll just leave them to it. We've done what we can. We've done what we're supposed to do.
It's little things like their right to remove children, right? Before that, the same way they will offer parent and child at birth, like parent and child placements or units, at any point that they receive a referral or they receive notification that they need to engage with the family and they're engaging with the family, they could offer a parent and child placement. They could offer that support. Relationship building needs to be key first. You can't go in there and go, we have concerns, so now, this is what we're doing. That's not going to work well. These people don't know you. These people are carrying trauma.
Let's use the enemy. Let's use the enemy.
And actually, you're an authority figure. So even if they've never had an interaction with the service in that way, a lot of people, whether it's because of authority, they have a problem, or actually you are somebody coming into their home and imposing something on them. It's a breach of their
sanctuary, of course.
And so, of course, they're not going to want to engage. They're going to be uncomfortable.
You're invading their safe space and their home.
They feel exposed, even if they aren't actually doing anything
wrong. I know. And be nervous, anxiety,
hypervigilance, anxiety.
And then it comes off as off key because says, "What's wrong with you? Have you done something really?" Yeah. I've seen that.
And
I do
one
think
of the reasons why I do work really hard to promote behavior, like the message behind behavior, as opposed to taking behavior at face value. There are so many reasons why someone can be off key. Neurodivergence is one. They might not like people very much. They may not know how to navigate social situations with new people. And you think that they are hiding something or very secret.
When they're just socially awkward.
Actually, they don't know how to deal with you. They don't know you. And so you can't, you have to go in and be curious as a professional about what's going on in the home. How can you help? And even if removal is looking like a parallel plan, why are we not introducing units and parent and child placement before removal? We can also do that for multiple children. It's just never explored. It's never explored. Their policies don't have remits. Like, it doesn't limit them to these things.
No, to be fair, I've seen a couple of local authorities when they've done that, when they've allowed mothers. Like when in my younger days, I went out with a couple of women that had children young, and they were. I've seen the firsthand them kind of units, and it was all right. It wasn't that bad at all.
Yeah.
And I visit one. I used to visit one of them quite often there.
This is it. I do wish. One of my biggest hopes for the system is that we will take that approach before removing children more. So if we know that this parent needs help and there is a possibility that things are going to escalate, first build your relationship with families. Get to know them for who they are. Build that relationship where they can start to discuss maybe some of the worries that they have. And that's not to say we won't have parents who will never speak for whatever their reasons are.
Yeah, no, you'll always think there'll always be abusive
There'll
system
always
or
be a
parents trying
couple.
to
It
hide
would be
things.
naive of us to say that if they just do things this way, everyone's going to fall in line and want to
No,
engage.
no,
Of
they
course,
won't.
they're not.
No.
It's still scary. You are asking people to relinquish control of their children, their life, because there is a problem that needs to be solved in a way that they never imagined having to solve.
You see, with
They're
that though,
asking
I always
things.
think extended family. Like, I'm a
Mhm.
big advocate for obviously non-resident dads that want their children. I
Yeah,
think yeah, they residence transfer or transfer to the grandparents or someone that maybe the godparents. Because when I was growing up,
absolutely.
all of us born in the 80s, we used to have,
Godparents.
christenings. My parents
Yeah,
showed me christenings and the godparents. I used to think, why do you do that? If we've got grandparents and aunties, uncles, why do you need godparents? But I guess they were picking the parents that would want to look after us if they
yeah.
died. So once I learned that, I said, yeah, well, why don't we do that? Godparents should be involved as well.
I miss the fact that we don't do that no more, because actually that's what kinship care is now. It's that if mum and dad can't do it and there's no one else,
Hmm.
can we be considered?
Hmm.
Can we be the ones that step up? And
Hmm.
outside of taking children to be parented elsewhere, how can I support parents and their children whilst they're at home before we get to that point? And that's again another fundamental skill and service that's being offered is the family group conference and kinship care. Lifelong links for care experienced
Hmm.
young people or adopted young people. I know it's being piloted, where even if you're facing isolated individuals, how do we track down people that may be good for them? How do we now build their village? If they've got one, how do we introduce this village into their world and let them take control of their child's journey and their journey before we get to a point where we're going into court and removing these children? And family group conferences has been seen to reduce escalation. We're talking about pre-proceedings. They're getting ready to go to court. And all of a sudden, these cases are dropping from pre-proceedings, child protection to child in need in a heartbeat, because the families are planning how they're going to support the parents, how they're going to support the child. And if that doesn't work and all fails, who can the child go to? How often can the child go there? How can we make sure that this work is done? Are there other services that the family thinks could be beneficial for the parents and the child, and how are we going to access that? How do we then put that, I don't know, that motivation behind the professionals to say, we need these services? And it's no longer about the parents saying, I need DV support, I need mental health. Actually, you've now got a village around the child and the parents saying, they need, this is what we're willing to do.
Hmm.
We will have the child on these days or whenever they have therapy. We will have them on the weekend. We'll help the shopping. We'll get them to appointments. We'll get them to school. But we need you now as a local authority, 3, 4 voices minimum saying, we need you to put in place. We need you to chase up. We need you to go and follow up. And to me, this screams that we actually have the solutions. We don't need to plan any more solutions. We actually need the government and local authorities to start investing in the way that they say that they support families, in the way that they're saying that they want to keep families together. This is how they prove it.
To
You
be
don't
fair,
need any
yeah,
more
cool.
bragging.
Yeah, but you know what that is? That's like public relations. A lot of these things is to prevent combative and rebellious behavior. That's why, because if they turn around and said every time, they said, you know what, we're not going to deal with that, or we're going to leave that family to the wolves. We can't. There's not enough money to look after. It looks too callous, so they
Mm,
don't want to do that because that doesn't win votes. So they have to appear to be, candid, while doing what they're doing behind the scenes and saying, look, we can't help with that one. That situation's gone bad. We'll leave them. We'll find someone more accommodating, or someone less difficult, someone with less issues, because that way it doesn't take up so much time and resources. But then obviously you got social workers saying, "No, this is terrible. We're basically your shield because we get the bad end of the stick." People criticizing us, saying we're the devil. We're trying to steal people's children, and then you're not supporting us with the professional services, even professional support. You want us
yeah,
to work caseloads that are too much for us, and then you weren't expecting excellent results, and we're burnt out, we're struggling ourselves, and then the
absolutely.
government said, "Oh, look, and more problems." Not again. Everyone's whinging. Just get on with it, man. Yeah, they cover it up. But I've seen it in these spaces. That's how they carry on. They said, "No, what? My God, no wonder why we have to do more
Yeah,
for ourselves, more
I really,
self-resourcing, more
I need these
community-based things within our
policymakers.
own, without
Yeah,
local authority and MPs, because that's you inviting these kind of troubles and this kind of lack of care into
no,
family dynamics."
we need them on the floor. I actually, unpopular opinion to the rest of the system, I need policymakers on the floor going into foster carers' homes and seeing what it's like to be a foster carer, seeing what it's like to be a birth family without support, seeing what it's like to run a 28-person caseload as a social worker. I need you on the floor. I need you on the floor looking at what that looks like day in and day out, because it's very hard, I think, to make a decision based on your social work experience or degree that you got 10 years ago now that you're an
It's
MP.
out of date. It's out of date.
So yeah, the locality that I live in, I've actually approached a number of times as a professional, and I'd said, look, we've got these services. It's built on these pieces of research that is already available. This is what we're offering. These people don't answer nobody. These people don't answer nobody. And I'm like, this is where we have a problem, because a lot of what we're doing, you're not paying for. We're willing to do a lot of this work, or we can get some of this work funded. We just want to get you on board. We want to open the doors. We want to do the work. We want you to be able to do your job and care for children, safeguard them and support their families. We want to break those barriers and offer the services that you need. And you just get those brick walls, and it's really disheartening, because I'm like, this is why parents struggle. This is why. Because you tell them that we want to keep families together, we want to support you, but when they are banging on doors, or we are banging on your door saying, let us help, let's see what we can do, let's think together, some local authorities don't want to hear it. Some, I'll be very honest, and I will not lie, I've had to go rogue and leverage one to say, if you don't talk to me, I know someone who will talk to me about
Of
what you've
course, yeah, I can understand that.
done. And I hate that, because what I've realized is, again, I've had to blackmail my way in other ways, but
Yeah,
it took
politicians do that all the time.
characteristics. But I don't want to be like them. That's what trauma made me live out before. I didn't
Yeah,
go
but that's
through all
because
of
the
this
power
work,
dynamic. The power
dipping my
dynamic. Remember,
toe.
you're doing it because there's been injustice.
But that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, no, it
That
shouldn't be the case.
shouldn't
If we
be
had
the
the right checks and balances in place, and in terms and society and in institutions,
far
we wouldn't have
better
to use those kind of
accountability.
tactics.
It shouldn't take for me to say, I will take my evidence to the media, because I know that you've not only failed me, but you failed multiple other people. And this is what I'm willing to do about it. If you don't come and talk to me about let's do the work, let's figure this out. It shouldn't be the case. I shouldn't have to leverage a local
Yeah, you shouldn't
authority.
have
If
to
I
do that,
tell
but
you,
it seems to be a thing. That's why I found it. I almost, choked when I saw coercive control was in the domestic abuse bill. Said people
yeah,
been using that on their employees at work. They be
they use
saying
it all the
it to the
time.
children, to their parents, yeah. So where does it stop?
It
It said,
doesn't.
it said
We need a
you're talking
culture
about a
shift,
society that is transparent and free and idealistic, like Walt Disney,
but it's not.
and that will never be like that. So what are you trying to do by legislating for all these things now?
Question. Did you know that in this country you can have records sealed to the highest degree, that even if you have the name, you can never find it? You can never find their details.
I thought that was only the privilege for like aristocracy, like royalty and cabinet ministers.
Hi, Han. I am a product of that very said situation.
See?
My parent was a part of a very well-known organized crime organization, sorry. And when she wanted out because her life was on the line, they basically sealed or didn't record any child safeguarding or previous removals. They didn't record any of her previous concerns, criminal behavior, anything that was
Is there
involved.
like witness protection that I see in the films?
It's the witness protection that you see in them films that you think that can't be real. That can't be real. And it's the same thing. Like, I have 3 older siblings who were placed in care less than 4 years before I was born for child endangerment, abandonment, neglect, and physical abuse. And even when I've gone to court, I've tried to take legal action against local authorities saying, hold on, I've seen in 3 sets of records that there were legal planning meetings to say she's met threshold, she's been in care for 2 years at a time, or 6 months at a time, or 9 months at a time. Let's get a full care order and start doing some work with mum and see if we can get mum on board. But if mum can't get on board, at least we know the child is safe. That never happened. That never happened. Everyone's position, and it's really stark because when I actually utilize my records for case study and training, and it's really weird because professionals are looking, quite senior ones, and going, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense at all. What do you mean you met the threshold for legal planning and a full care order under 3 local authorities from a span of 2 to 16, and yet nothing was ever done? And I don't know the full details. Even on records, my first 2 years, I'm a ghost. I don't have any early years records. I've had to pull records from NHS and say, if you don't find these records, I'm going to start taking people to court. Because what do you mean I can't find my records? The place they said I was
like a subject to access request though? Because
I've done
that
it.
with my eldest son, and it's still
I've
there.
done it, and I managed to get maybe the first year where it mentioned I was admitted into hospital for certain things, but I have no birth records.
Jesus.
And
I thought they could only redact, like what they did with Trump. I thought they could only redact. No.
Normally, what they say is that if they have the name, they can look it up. However, if they don't, they can't just look and go, well, we've got this name, so there's no like tracking. But if you have the name, but when it got to the point where when my eldest 2 were being adopted, or they were looking at where they could go, and I didn't want my children going into my mother's care. Not because I don't love her. I love her dearly. However, there's a lot of work that hasn't taken place. You've got 4 kids.
You're looking for the best outcome, best environment. Yeah, of course.
There is so much going on here that it wasn't the best place for them. And I'd known her name. I'd known everything from I was really young. In fact, I was telling professionals from I was 2 years old, I'm going to get my family members who are a part of X, Y, and Z to come and do X, Y, and Z to you. I had come out of going back to my mother's country. When I came back, and I had learned how to drill out guns and turn them into replica guns. I'd learned how to build, but I'd done all these things, and I was telling them how to do this. I was showing them, and I was told I was mentally ill, unwell, and I was a fantasist. But how does a 4-year-old know how to do it if I'm mad, like if I'm ill?
Yeah, that's
and so I didn't want my children going there. I didn't want my children going there. And I said to them, I'll give you her name. If I give you her name, will you get all the information you need to make sure my children go there? I gave them the name. Thankfully, her assessment was negative anyways. They said, look, with all the information we've got, we can't place them there. But what I heard, what I was told was, we can't pull any information. There's nothing to find. And I'm like, what do you mean there's nothing to find? Do you need to go to court? Do you need me to go to court? What do I need to do to unseal these records or to find them? What do you need from me? And there was nothing. There was nothing that the local authority could do. And that was my biggest eye-opener that made me think. They were aware. It was recorded in different stages of my life that this was happening. So the countries and systems are built on secrets. And you are expected...
Of course, they'll tell you national security and public safety.
They'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But then when that same national security implicates children into further crime, harm, and problems, and prevents parents from accessing the support that they actually need to be able to move forward with their life. Because I actually believe that if my mum had been held accountable and said and was told, like I was, you went through some hard stuff, some serious stuff. We want to make sure this never happens again. Let's do the work.
Break the curse. Yeah, of course.
I think we would have had problems, but life would have been very different. Life would have been very different. So they prevented her from receiving the support that she needed. But in a standard case where I probably would have gone to court, took out a lawsuit and sued all 3 local authorities and won, because I was told, go and pursue it by legal. I was told, you have a case, do it. But because of the amount of discrepancies and gaps in records and information they wouldn't use in court, despite the fact that it was in records, it never worked. So if we're built on secrecies, lies, and exceptions and exemptions, why on earth are families going to be able to be transparent and
And honest with
believe that
you,
they also have
and
to be a part of
well,
the
because the
journey?
way they see it, we provide you with infrastructure, taxes, jobs, opportunity. This is not Timbuktu. This is not, Kandahar. So the way they see it is that for these privileges, this is what you have to put up with. There is no perfect society. Yeah,
We don't expect perfect, but we
that's the
expect a
way they see it.
compassionate one.
Mm,
We don't expect perfect. That would be we know as humans we are not capable of
mm.
perfection. Whatever perfection is meant to be, because again,
Of course,
that's
it's
something that's
unobtainable.
it's subjective as well. What
Mm,
you think is perfect and what I think is perfect are
it's
two different
different. Yeah, of
things.
course, it's different.
And I wouldn't expect perfection from my professionals, but what I do expect from my professionals, from my systems, is integrity, is
Mm,
ethics, morality,
mm,
it's just actions and decision making.
mm,
And if we can't get to a position where that is an obligation in systems, we
mm.
are going to struggle to flood that into the systems working on the ground. We're going
Of
to
course,
struggle. And
and
then you're not going to get that
it's
from
gonna
your
lead to more
families.
social breakdown. Of course, it's still gonna
You
yeah,
can't build
yeah,
on
exactly. And so
secrets
this is
and
how
lies.
this is how regimes and governments and countries collapse. If you put the
Absolutely.
pressure and that happens long enough, people snap. And obviously,
Absolutely.
in mass,
The brain can only handle
you talking
so
about
much.
revolutions and things like that. I know. Mm,
The brain can only handle so much, I
mm,
think, for one person. And I think whether your story is as far-fetched or an anomaly as mine, or it is what they consider textbook trajectory of
mm,
adversity, trauma, poverty, you name it,
mm,
it don't matter what the story is. But if you're facing it with compassion, if you're facing it with solution-based thinking and going, okay, we can hold space for what you're lacking, what you're missing,
mm,
what you never had, how we may have failed you, whether we knew or not in your own experiences. And now figure out how we get you to a position where you're thinking about your child. Because I think that's the key. It's one thing to go, I love my child. I give them the best clothes, the best roof over their head, the best food. I do all
mm,
these things, but thinking about how every decision affects a child indirectly as opposed to directly. Modeling, because modeling is something that is missing. We talk about role models and influence, but we lose that in children's social care. How your social worker could be your first
yeah, of course.
example
Of
of
modeling,
what
of
it
course,
means
and
to,
then
to
and that
receive
impression can be
compassion.
lasting. First impression lasts.
And if for the best, and sometimes more often than not,
Mm,
unfortunately, right now, for families, it's for the worst.
mm,
But you see, when I met that one good social worker, oh my days, it changed my life. Because it didn't mean I looked at all social workers and went, you're all going to be good. But what that meant is when I had to transition departments, and actually that social worker left the borough.
mm,
I have a hunch it may have been based on what happened because of how things played out for me. Um, I might be wrong. It might have just been
mm,
she wanted to work somewhere else, but she
mm,
went. And I would have never opened up to another social worker. And knowing that I ended up working with them for 5 years, I could have never done that had I not had a social worker offering me truth, integrity, empowerment, compassion, and just being utterly raw about the situations that we were in and what we had to do.
mm. Well, we'll have to think. We'll have to do something about it. Maybe a regulator. I always say a regulator the people. Like I
We've
said, if
been
you have
talking about national panels,
yeah, of
like
course, but with
national
people
panels
and the
with the
public.
experts by experience who live this, who work this, who know adversity, who know families, who know community, sitting on those panels and overseeing how those systems are working, how changes need to be made. We have been advocating it for 4 years now. And I'm hoping that MPs and policymakers are listening. If not, we'll keep pressing because it's one thing having your panels deciding when families or how families will get support,
Mm,
but we also need those who have lived this, who
mm,
have worked through this in whatever way that has looked like for them. Doesn't always need to be you've had to be in care or you've had to have
mm,
social work involvement. If you have suffered or you have faced a problem and you
mm,
have had to overcome it as a
mm,
parent, as a young person,
Yeah, of
You
course.
have a story to tell. You have an experience that feeds into the systems.
But things like that, like I tell Nana and Dr. Alice Lovin, all it takes is a bit, some courses, especially if you've got lived experience. Remember, academic qualification, vocational qualifications only to formalize that you've learned and studied and committed to something, and that you have a
Absolutely.
reasonable knowledge about it. Not necessarily expert, but reasonable. Once they
Yeah.
do that, and then you set out the rules base that's supposed to level the playing field, so everyone is, there's not a
But
tier
this
two,
is the
tier one. Then
thing.
I think it can
Is
easily be
again,
done. Because look, at
I
the
do
moment,
think
I'm on an
so.
IAG for my local authority, well, independent advisory group. Now, I didn't want that.
Love
I'm just
it.
like a member of Mountain Bain Voice. I'm not an executive. I'm not a director. But someone dropped out and they asked me to come in the group. There's 5 pastors in there, 3 community
Wow.
interest company directors, and the superintendent
Love
from
it.
my area. So I said, if that can be, and as long as they didn't ask me not for DBS or anything, and they said, "Oh, I'll keep you be advisory group because you're like a stakeholder in a organization,
Yeah.
like a charitable organization. So can you come and represent?" And so obviously they're telling me certain things, and they said, "My goodness, what is this? What goes on?" So
Yeah.
they do already do that, but it's just not
Yeah.
available to and allow it in public domain really.
We
So
need influence, because I think this is the other thing that we face in this field. Expert by experience is very tokenistic. It's like a tick box to say, oh, we have someone who's lived this,
yeah, but there's no executive
but
powers.
it's
That's
not
the thing.
respected.
Yeah,
It's
but
not respected.
Yeah, but what happens? A lot of these groups, there's no executive powers. Like I said, when I go in there, they said, "Oh, listen, this is not a thing where you over excessively critique or you come with your activism, Sean. This is more of a critical friend exercise. So we give advice. We tell them what we think could benefit. Obviously, a lot of these institutions that are involved here, they may not have the best public relations image, but they do a lot of good work behind the scenes. In the main, it keeps society on a level playing field, where crime doesn't spill out into the streets. There's people can go about in relative safety. I said, yeah, I'm aware of that. I never denied that. Obviously, you have to have these things in place because otherwise,
Yeah.
everyone would be a law unto themselves. I understand that.
Well, this is the
I said,
thing.
but
I
with
will
people
never
involved
say
and having
system
executive
money.
powers, I said that way it's not a case of consultations only mean you can discuss and they will listen to you. Doesn't mean they have to act upon it. We should have certain amount of veto powers over public policy, and we should have executive powers to where you have to implement at least a third of what we want when it's beneficial to the community and public members of the public. It should be. So that's not hard to
But
do.
what's the point? I mean, what's the point otherwise? It's one thing asking, I mean, even as a critical friend, that title speaks for itself. You critique how something works, no? And listen, I'm all for giving local authorities their roses when things start to take off and things really start to work.
Mm,
I have been my local authority, my corporate parent.
mm,
I think they don't know how to take me more time, because how I got into their graces professionally wasn't exactly orthodox. But
mm.
I know when I've seen that things have worked for them, I've been the biggest advocate. I'll
Yeah, of
go and speak
course.
to the
That's what they
minister
want
and
because it
say,
benefits everyone
go
then.
and look. Go and look at their family hub. Go and look
Mm,
at their
mm,
care
mm.
leavers offer now. Go and look at their SGO offer. Go and look. Go and replicate. Go and make them an
Yeah, of
example
course,
where
and
they
make it
are
a
an
universal
example.
thing. Yeah,
But
true. I've seen. You see,
for
when for my
we
eldest son.
still we need to be looking
Mm,
at what's not working and own that.
mm,
We
mm.
need to own it.
Yeah, even my eldest son, there was about 3 or 4 that said, "Oh, Sean, I feel away for you. I don't know how this has happened." They were showing me like therapeutic service. I didn't know anything about that. Or like
Wow.
said, this is the policy you need to enforce on them to make sure you get your complaint upheld. Yeah, behind the scenes, obviously without name, they behind the scenes, yeah, this is what you should be doing because it said this should never have gone on. What you've been through. Yeah, it said it's awful. So I was shocked. And some of them approached me on Twitter at the time before
Wow.
Twitter before his ex. I was shocked. I couldn't
Wow.
believe it. So I said, "Do you want you get into trouble for this?" Obviously, as long as you don't name drop me and you keep it to yourself. Yeah, it's. I was shocked. So I said they are good ones. And obviously, I met Nana. I used to work with his brother,
Awesome.
finding enough at Facebook. Yeah,
Really?
no, his brother. His cousin. So I thought, what? And I said, yeah, because I used to get him to sign my dad's petition, family petition. He said,
Yeah.
look, I want to sign. He said, you trying to do this? You're doing this and you're supposed to be like a facilities engineer. What is all this? He said, this is what I'm doing on part time. This is what I'm passionate about. So he said, listen, I've got a cousin, even though it took about 3 years before Nana actually trusted me because I used to get after him. I said, no, I'm not having that. Social skills need to improve. I smell sulfur when one of you don't go past. I say, I can't have you on. I said, no, but if you do good thing, I said, I'm a fair man. If I see something good, and that's how I would tell people. So remember, there's some people now that tell me I've gone middle of the road. Yeah, that said, oh, like I'm being a token and thing like that. Yeah, or I'm being a simp.
Stand in the middle.
Yeah,
Keep
exactly.
standing in the
Exactly. So I
middle.
said, yeah, so it's easy like I said. So his nana said, Raw, why didn't you come on? Then when I went on his podcast twice, I said, Raw, I didn't realize he was like this. And you help people with both genders. I said, yeah, because I've seen women and men, mums and dads suffer injustice. I've seen social workers where children or the parents lied on them. And then I've seen it in reverse. So I know these things go on. I'm talking from experience, not from textbook and reading news
No.
articles. I know from personal experience. So I said injustice is wrong in any level of society, no matter who it is. Because it ruins
Absolutely. And
life.
that's what we need.
So I said,
That's
yeah,
what the
something.
country needs to replicate now.
Mm.
As long as it's an injustice,
Exactly.
it shouldn't
Then
matter where
no one
you
will be
are
out of
in the
turn. No one
town.
will feel seething and be angry, and it will reduce, tension and anxiety. It can increase trust. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
society would function better. Everyone would benefit.
100%.
Obviously, it's ideal, isn't it? It's ideal. I told the judge once, remember, the scales of justice, balance. Then they said, my friend said, you sound like Thanos out of yes, yes, not like that, not like that, but obviously it's thing. But I said, yeah, I see what you're saying.
We just got these conversations that start to open up those doors really, and it's a long time coming. I can't believe in 2026 we're still having these conversations.
You will do, because no one
Things are
passes the baton.
moving. What I will tell you is hearing High Lord judges, all these fancy labels that I thought these people would never be in the same room as me, and sitting in the room with them and having a big conversation while I eat my fancy looking Kiev thing. And they are literally like, we can see there's a problem. Even in terms of adoption, this quote, I don't remember anything that I talk about, right? But this judge, I will never forget, he spoke at an event and he was saying that particularly where adoption is concerned, if we are having to look at increasing parental contact after adoption, we need to consider why we're making adoption orders in the first place. Things like that lets me know we aren't the only ones here. It's no longer just for civilians. You've got judges working FDAC, one of the pioneers, or pioneers probably the wrong word, but he advocates massively for FDAC and giving families an opportunity. Passionate on the ground.
You might have a personal experience or a family member that's gone through it, maybe.
Well, do you know what? You never know. But even if whether they do or they don't, I can't tell, because all I see is passion for what is going on in this sector. To recognize that we are failing families by not offering services. To recognize when we're adopting kids out just because we don't or can't give them what they need, as opposed to finding it and making it work. It doesn't sit well with a lot of people now. And I think one of the things that even the minister said recently was that he was tired of talking. He just wanted to do. He's ready to just get things done. And I think this is where we need to be now. These people in these positions being sick of talking, but I need them to get on the ground and talk to people like me and you. Talk to people
but you know
like
what happened? It's the machinery. You'll always get individuals like that, like champions of justice, messiahs. But what happened is the machinery behind them, the institution behind them said, look, no, you're going over the far.
They can't.
Too far
and that's
now.
the other thing. If their hands are tied, what do you do then? How do we live with that? How do you continue in your job living with that knowing?
That's why you get people that resign and they disappear and things like that, or they change careers. There's a book that I read by Will Collins. He was talking about the empathy gap between the genders in the UK. And I remember I approached and said, look, we could use your help in these, we're up in these meetings with, ministers, councillors, local authority leaders. I said, no, Sean, I'm done with that. I've had my day with that. I just write books now. Yeah, there's a few. I've had a few, like of the senior people like in their 50s, 60s. I said, no, they're finished with that. They've been for years. I said, but that's because you're working in the shadows and then you're isolated. If you have joined forces with people, you might have had still a bit more energy to keep going.
Absolutely.
And then obviously said, when there's a break in the chain now, it's like you're having to start again from ground zero. There should be a handover like they have at work. Handover, you pass the baton on, like the relay. You pass the baton on to someone that's willing, but don't maybe have your knowledge and experience.
That's the tricky
that
bit.
happens, and that's why we have the generational problems. where you think, where's the change? Where we have all these things now, instant information,
Whereas
and
we're
then you think,
expecting to break those
AI, but yeah,
cycles.
things are still not
Yeah.
progressing in the way. There's productivity is low.
Systemically and politically, yeah, things are just, it's like one person comes out of the role, a new person comes in, and instead of going, okay, let's look at what's working, what the person did, what's working, what their agendas were, and then kind of following on, they go, no, I have a good idea. This is what we're going to do. Scrap that, start again. And I'm like, oh my God, it couldn't be any more frustrating because you think we're making movements now. We've worked hard. We've got the numbers they need. We've got the influence that they need. We've got them on board. Let's move forward. And God forbids that there is a political change up in the House of Commons and the House of Lords or whatever, because
I don't think
once that
Labour will
happens,
survive.
you lose it all. You lose it all.
Of course.
And it is the biggest frustration for many of us in the sector who do actually manage to get those meetings in and speak to the right people, because you get that legroom and then it's ripped away, and you now have to answer to all the families you're working with to say, we have worked so
What
hard.
happened? Yeah, they get disheartened. And they're thinking, what's the
And then
point?
they think we're the sellouts. They
Yeah,
think
of
we're
course.
shut up people just trying to kiss backsides, when actually this system is not easy. It's not easy to navigate. And even when you find the right people, if they fall sick, if they resign, if they get sacked, anything goes wrong at any given moment, to think that all your hard work could disappear.
Yeah, disappear like that. That's why people said, why bother with that, Sean? Why even bother with that? I said, it's like my therapist. If I don't do that, I'll be doing something worse, much worse. The kind of man I am. So
hear you. And actually, I don't think we can afford to. Whilst I know what duty and responsibility should mean to professionals, as a former foster kid, I see foster kids as my corporate siblings. They're just my corporate. I may never meet them. I may never speak to them. But because of that, I feel like I have the duty of care, and I have to take duty of care much further than a conversation. I don't think I could sleep well knowing I don't sleep well. Let me have one day where I get a phone call to hear this mum's kids have been removed and they're not giving her any support, and she was a foster kid, or this was going on and something. I'm going to be up all night. And I can't change the whole world. I can't change the whole system. And any changes that I hope to make or contribute to, I may not see in this lifetime. I may not.
of course.
But because I hang on to that hope, and I've seen how things have moved,
that's your name, ain't it? That's your name, Hope. That's what I put in the title.
It is. I was given that
tomorrow.
Name at birth, and that's what I came here to give the people. Okay, I came to give them the hope. But that's it. I will hang on to that for dear life. And I think if one thing my story could show anyone is, just when you think you know what's coming next, whether as a professional or a personal level, things can change very quickly. And it's because of how quickly things can change. One conversation, one email, one dropout, one newcomer, one new thought process, one moment. And all of a sudden, things are spinning on their heads. And now we're talking about new solutions. I'm not saying that's going to happen every time we have a bright idea. But all it takes is one right conversation at the right time, and things can change.
Yeah, of course.
If we can't do it at a policy level, then we work backwards. We hit the ground running. We bang on every local authority's door and say, hi, we're here. This is what we have to offer. You might not want to work with us, but your families do.
You feel you might be able to help me with this Be Well Hub I'm trying to do. I'm trying to have a Be Well Hub, but obviously for all generations.
Whatever. Listen, I will do whatever I can, whether you need me to promote some stuff, signpost people, whatever you send me, what you got, we'll make it work. Because I will be building services as well. I want to kind of build like service mapping as well.
Well, you're North London. Are you North London?
No, I'm Bedfordshire now, darling. I am a Londoner. Jesus. I am a Londoner. Well,
you're in Tommy Robinson territory.
Cut that out, please, because I might get in trouble. I don't know about all that. I'm originally from London. Well, I was born in Birmingham, spent my early years in Southeast London, and then lived in Walthamstow for my early teens.
And then
I was living in Edgware in Brent Cross until I was 18, and then just said, you know what, the city's not for me. I'm a country girl. I need to leave. So I did.
That's it.
So yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on today. It's been very colourful, very enlightening.
It has been crazy, but thank you for having me, and whatever we can do to keep these conversations going and now bring them to life, I'm glad we could
Yeah,
do.
no, of course, I would definitely. Now that we've had the initiation, me, because obviously before he's only snatched conversations on the Disruptors Network group and LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. Of course, I would. I would definitely be in keep in touch.
Let's do that.
Thanks for coming on.
Well,
And that's a wrap, everyone. Where there are people, there is power. Justice in our time.